Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about today the idea of measuring payment performance and how to align your subscription payment measurements with your actual revenue numbers. I'm just going to jump right into this today. My name is Nicholas DeGuise. I am the Vice President of Client Success here at FlexPay. I've been working with the merchants that have been working with FlexPay for going on about 10 years now. I'm very familiar with all of the numbers we're going to be talking about today. And I'm very excited to share with you guys how we go about measuring your business's performance, what your success rates look like, and hopefully help you guys understand a little bit better of how you can measure some of these metrics and how you can actually tie these to the actual profitability and growth of your businesses. So what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to do a very brief overview of the payment processing system in both the e-commerce and the subscription space. I want to show a little bit, talk a little bit with you about the authorization rates and debunk a few misconceptions around payment authorization rate. I'll share with you a couple of real world examples that we've looked at in the past with merchants we've spoken with and that we've worked with. And I want to show you a little bit about why we consider payment success rate a more accurate KPI on the growth and profitability of your business. So, starting off today, I'm sure you're all aware of this, but I'll just touch on it quickly. So in the payment processing world, you really have a very basic workflow where you have a transaction is going to be initiated by a system. In an e-commerce world, this is usually going to be from your landing page, where your customer is going to be initiating a transaction and attempting to check out from their cart. In the subscription world, this is usually going to be a merchant-initiated transaction that's going to be driven by a billing engine. From there, both payments are sent to a payment gateway. Both payment gateways will then send it to the underlying issuing bank to be approved. And then you will either get a result back of an approved payment or a declined payment. In a declined payment, you're usually going to be looking at your involuntary churn numbers. In your e-commerce space, it's going to be your cart abandon rate. And overall, you're going to be looking at your card authorization rate. And apologies, I did want to point out earlier, if anybody does have any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to put them in the QA box in the bottom corner. I will answer those at the end of the session. So, as I was saying, you have some pretty basic rates that basic metrics you're going to be looking at. And methodologies to calculate that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to talk with you a little bit about an authorization rate. This is the rate of transactions being approved versus, let me rephrase that. This is the transactions being approved divided by the transactions that you are attempting. In general, the best practice is to keep your authorization rate above 60%. Once you start getting past that 60% or below that 60% mark, you start getting into risks and you start getting into questions with your merchant processors. You might end up questions with your merchant banking saying, why is your success rate so low? Visa and MasterCard might flag you for additional risk. Usually you want to keep it above a 60% rate. What will be affecting your authorization rate is things like changes in the quality of data you're presenting to the actual payment gateway, the payload, the way you're building your payload, what you're sending in, that can have an impact on your authorization rate. The types of customers you're acquiring, what types of customers you're bringing in, what marketing sources you're going to be getting them from, that will have an impact on your authorization rates as well. Different practices within your business, your MCC codes, the types of cards you're going to be accepting, whether you're accepting prepaid cards or not prepaid cards, that can have an impact, and any kind of potential network or issuer outage. So these are all things that can affect your authorization rate. And normally, when a merchant starts working with FlexPay, they understand, they have a specific perception of what authorization rate looks like. They assume that a higher authorization rate directly relates to a higher revenue stream. And the expectation is that a lower authorization rate will usually imply that there's some kind of suspected fraud going on, that there's a lower level of trust by the issuers, that there's possibly some technical problems that are affecting your authorization rate. And overall, the assumption is that an authorization rate is a health indicator showing the validity and the health of your merchant account. And all of these are actually, most of these, let me rephrase that, are accurate. Most of these are right. This authorization rate does show how you're doing as far as fraud goes, how you're doing as well as trust with the issuer. If there are, a low authorization rate does usually imply that there's no technical problems, or that there are potentially technical problems. And one thing that we've seen, and one thing we do with merchants, is we've helped them go through practices to actually improve their authorization rate, which is what's going to bring us to the next slide. So the next slide here is a real world example of an authorization rate improvement. So we worked with some merchants that we had. It was a B2B business. They were experiencing a high decline rate, high chargeback rates. We introduced them to a fraud tool. We helped them to understand why their authorization rates were low, what was causing their chargeback rates. And they actually were able to bring their authorization rate up by 7 points from 51 to 58%. As you can see, this is already below the threshold, and this was a very valuable exercise for them to do. It was a very positive win for the company because it did help them directly impact their fraud losses, their chargeback penalties, and keep their merchant accounts healthier. That all being said, I want to jump in here. The truth about the authorization rate is improving this authorization rate did not directly improve their revenue. By changing this authorization rate and just driving it up, they actually, at the end of the day, they actually hurt their internal revenue because they blocked a number of transactions that could have gone through and could have successfully billed through for them. By increasing their authorization rate and making their processes more rigid, they actually hurt their revenue in the long run. Which, at the end of the day, they sat down and said, well, what's happening? Our business is doing less than we were before. Why is that? And that's where we wanted to really get into talking with them. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, about a metric that we call the payment success rate. This is a metric that you can use as a business to help capture the quality of the approved transactions and the revenue that is going to be coming out of those improved transactions. When you're using a payment success rate, you really want to, it's a, for lack of a better term, you look at this as a cohort analysis. You're saying, I am expecting a certain number of bills every month. And how many of those bills that I expected am I successfully able to pull through? This is the metric that you really want to focus on. And this is what I'm going to dig into in the next few slides. So again, payment success rate is the revenue from successful payments divided by the total expected billing that you would have in a month. To walk you through this in a little bit more detail here. So taking an example of a merchant who has 10,000 customers. If you have a 15% decline rate, you're actually going to have 8,500 successful customers, generating a grand total of $425,000 of revenue. When you're looking at this from an authorization rate, this looks like you are getting an 85% success rate. And this is true. This is 85% of your attempted transactions. You're attempting each of these transactions once, and you're getting an 85% success rate. When you introduce the concept of retrying transactions, attempting to recapture transactions, attempting to do something to re-engage these customers in the meantime, what that's going to do is that's going to actually lower the rate that you're looking at. So introducing the next example here, if you have the exact same cohort of customers where you have 10,000 customers that are failing or that are processing each month or expected to process each month, you have 1,500 customers that fail, and you retry those customers each month, you're going to be introducing a large number of additional transactions into your mix. So if you're measuring success of your business by just saying the total number of successful transactions, divided by the total number of attempted transactions, this is going to make your authorization rate about 61%. And some people would say, well, that's a huge drop. I was at 85%, now I'm at 61%. I must be doing worse overall. But when you look at the actual metrics at the end of the day, if I jump back 2 slides, you'll see here that you're actually generating $425,000 of revenue from this first cohort of customers with no reattempts, and it looked like you were getting an 85% success rate. Jump forward, you're looking at $435,000 of revenue, which is an increase of $20,000 of revenue, but your authorization rate is looking much lower. This is why we want to talk about payment success rate. When you're talking about a payment success rate, you're actually saying that I had $443,000 of revenue generated from this $500,000 of expected revenue, instead of the 85% that we saw earlier. So this is the real metric that we're talking about here, and this is the real area that we want to focus on for success and growth of business. So I'm going to take a quick pause here because I've gone through this relatively quickly. I do want to see if anybody has any questions before I jump into a quick summary of this. So feel free to ask your questions in the bottom corner of the webinar. As I mentioned, I can answer those for you. I do have a couple of questions coming through very quickly here. So the first question I have here coming from Lily in the audience is, how granular have you seen merchants go in measuring this type of differentiation? So do they do it per product? Do they do it at a subscription program, at a billing frequency? It's a great question. One thing I will say with this is you can measure this as granularly as you would any other subscription or any other metric you would have in your business. So if you are already measuring your success rates at a program level, for example, at a marketing level, you can measure your payment success rate in the exact same way. One thing to note for your payment success rate, it is important that you are doing this you are cohorting this. So you always do want to tie this to the initial transaction and the initial amount that you would have expected from your customer. But you can, again, break that down as granularly as you want to. I have another question here from Mark. What have you seen happen when you fall below a 60% authorization rate? Mark, that's a great question. So I had mentioned earlier, you really want to keep your authorization rates, and this is authorization rates, to be clear. So this is the total number of transactions and the total number of approvals on those transactions. You do want to keep that above a 60% rate. This is very much dictated by Visa and MasterCard, and if you fall below that rate, just to clarify, it's not going to be the end of your business. It's not going to be the end of the world. What it will do is it will put additional scrutiny on your merchant accounts. It will put additional scrutiny on your processing practices. And that additional scrutiny can lead to additional risk scores, additional risk flags that can be associated to your account. So you generally want to try to avoid those. If it does fall too far below that metric, obviously you can do a number of things. You can introduce risk and fraud flags. You can introduce new tools to validate the type of data that you're going to be sending through to the gateways. There's a number of things you can do, but you do want to try to keep that above that 60% as much as possible. So Robbie is asking me a question about, super interesting, how would you start incorporating fraud costs into this metric as well to get a profit success rate? So Robbie, that's a great question. Excuse me. So you can directly do what you're suggesting is you can remove your fraud and or your refunds directly from the numerator in this calculation. You could sit down, and that is something that we do when we're working with merchants, is we will automatically credit and we will remove refunds and chargebacks from any metrics that we're presenting to show them to show you what a true success rate would look like. So using your logic, Robbie, you would actually just take your refunds, your chargebacks, any kind of fraud risk right out of the top number, the numerator, and you would reduce your payment success rate by those fraud filters and those fraud numbers. I hope that helps and hope that answers that question, Robbie. Tara has asked a question. Tara, nice to see you again. Tara, you asked the question, can we fix the health of our MIDs once it has gotten below 60% authorization rate? Yes, you can definitely fix the health of your merchant account by once it has fallen below that 60% auth rate. What you'll need to do is you're going to want to improve your authorization rate overall. You'll want to introduce fraud flagging or fraud tools like I had suggested earlier. You'll want to look at other ways to help improve your authorization rate. Think of things like validating bins before you accept them, and identifying certain bank or certain card types that may have a lower authorization rate for you, and blocking those transactions before they ever happen. By cleaning up your authorization rate as a whole and bringing it above that 60% ratio, you're going to increase over time. Now, this is not an immediate thing. Over time, however, your merchant accounts will appear healthier, which will ultimately lead to better approval rates long term. But there is going to be some work that needs to do to go into that. And if you'd like to, Tara, I know we've spoken in the past. We can reconnect. I can walk through a few things that you could potentially do with your authorization rates, try to help improve those. If anybody else is curious about this as well, you can reach out via or contact us on this. We can talk through those. We can also introduce you to a number of other parties that focus on entirely cleaning up your authorization and your processing rates. So we have a couple of people that we know in the industry that can help with that, and we'd be happy to introduce you guys. Therese is asking, what are the benchmarks for the payment success rate? Therese, when you say the benchmarks for the payment success rate, I'm assuming you're talking about, is there any low watermark that you would want to stay above for the payment success rate? If that is the case, I would say that from a processing perspective, there's no low water line that you would really want to stay above from a payment success perspective. The payment success rate is purely the higher your payment success rate, ultimately the more profitable you will be in your business. The goal is to keep the payment success rate as high as possible while keeping the authorization rate as close to that, or as close to that 60% line as you can. Obviously, the more you're able to attempt to authorize your payments, the more you will successfully be able to capture authorized or successful payments without putting yourself at further risk. Sharice, you asked another question. Does collecting CVV from codes from a customer increase the authorization rate? In an e-commerce perspective, yes. Capturing your CVV and passing your CVV on the e-commerce initial payments, you will see a marked improvement of your authorization rate. For subscription merchants, you cannot capture and store a CVV. So that for a subscription merchant will not necessarily help your authorization rates. What you can do is you can tokenize your payment method through your merchant processor, through your gateways. That does help improve your authorization rate overall. But you cannot and you should not store CVVs for any kind of subscription businesses. It's completely against the Visa and MasterCard guidelines, and also the PCI guidelines as well. So from a data security perspective. I have Lauren asking, I would love to say, guys, really quickly, I appreciate all of the questions. These are really great. Lauren is asking a question of which department is best suited to measuring this metric. which is also a great question. So this is highly dependent on your business. Some businesses will have accounting or the finance team manage their success rate. Some people will have a payments team that are going to be focused only on the payment processing and ensuring that the payment processing is being most effectively used. Other companies that we've worked with have a retention team that focuses on exactly this. So this really is going to be a question that is dictated by your business and the structure of your internal operations. The ultimate goal, though, is that somebody is measuring this for you. We do have, we've done in the past a few webinars on exactly this topic of who should measure, what departments should measure these metrics. You can go to our website and see our resource library to get some of those older, those older and previous webinars. Hopefully that can help you understand how best to measure this. That seems like the end of the first batch of questions. If nobody else has any, I'll just move on here. If you do, feel free to send through any other questions you might have. So, a few takeaways from today. Authorization rate is very important for the health of your business, and you should be keeping your authorization rate above a 60% rate at all times. If you do go below that, it's not the end of the world. There are a number of things you can do to help improve that overall, and by keeping it above that 60% rate, even if you have dipped below in the past, you will be able to restore the health of your merchant accounts. Improvement, another takeaway here is the improvements to the authorization rates will not directly impact the revenue of your business, and it may actually, in the short term, actually generate less revenue for you. But in the long term, by bringing that authorization rate up, you will be able to have higher revenue overall because your merchant accounts will be healthier, and you'll ultimately be able to approve more transactions long term. And if you are looking at measuring revenue, you do want to be measuring revenue and revenue growth with a payment success rate, which is, again, grouping your payments as by cohorts, assuming that one payment or one approval is tied to one payment, regardless of how many times you had to try to get that approval done. As a quick side note, this was all based on using about 4 retries on average, which we highly recommend is that is your sweet spot. To keep your authorization rate healthy, you really want to try approximately 4 on average, assuming an 85% approval rate out of the gate. That can change over time with your business. If you are interested in understanding this more and understanding how to calculate your authorization rate, or your payment success rate and how much you can reattempt, we're happy to speak with you. You're welcome to reach out at any time. You can get us through our contact page, and we can go through that with you and walk through any questions you have. So going on here, this is last call for any questions if anybody has any. If not, I'll happily end the webinar now. It will be available on demand for you to review again in the future. And as I said, you can always reach out to FlexPay, and we're happy to walk through any of these metrics with you independently. Perfect. Well, I think at that point, I will say thank you, everyone, for participating today, for joining today. It was a great engagement from the audience, and I look forward to potentially hearing from you guys in the future.